Hi, I'm Matt Tabak, live at Grand Prix Anaheim / Grand Prix Disneyland / Grand Prix SoCal / Grand Prix what? Welcome to the Magic Show.
The cool thing that Wizards has done is that they made block a lot better. Like when I was coming up in the Pro Tour, block used to be pretty simple. It was almost always just two decks. It was some sort of tribal beatdown deck and then whatever deck exploited the best mechanic. And like it was a consistent pattern through every block Pro Tour. It was like Rising Order, Rebels, Rocket Shoes, Solution, Goblins, Astral Slide, Mono Black, Blue Green, Affinity, Mono Red. It was a consistent pattern. And then they created Planeswalkers.
I don't know if I'm the only one in the room, but I actually like the format.
I think Innistrad Block Constructed is actually really interesting.
This block constructed is pretty bad, like most block constructed. So the card pool is just too small. You just don't have enough, you don't have enough answers, you don't have enough mana fixers, you don't have enough, like, varied threats per color, so you have a lot of the same decks.
It's fine, it's a block constructed format. I don't tend to love or hate formats the same way other people do. I think the tendency of people is to complain about any format. You hear people say, this is the worst format of all time, about anything. I mean, look at when someone posts on Facebook, what are the 3 best draft formats of all time? You'll get every single draft format in the history of time answered as the best, and then someone saying, I can't stand that block, you know?
Block is weird. Block is different because the mana is like so bad.
Look, the mana's bad in this block constructed format.
It's not like other block formats like in Zendikar, where you could play stuff like Lotus Cobra, and there was dual lands that came into play tap and gain a life, and then there was the fetch lands, so you had tons of options. You could play Rug, you could play Mono Green, and there's a lot of viable decks. But I feel like in this block format, there's just, your options are pretty bad because it's Evolving Wilds and that's it. Like the deck that won the Pro Tour, his mana was 10 plains and 13 islands. You never see decks like that anymore.
I think Miracle creates a lot of cool dramatic moments. I'm not a huge fan of how it plays out a lot of the time because, it's, well, I drew it now and it's insane, or I drew it in my opening hand, it's terrible. So I think it's good for Magic overall because it creates really cool stories. Like the fact that the Miracle deck won the Pro Tour is awesome. Those, like, actually watching every draw step was amazing. It's like, oh, is it there? Is it there? So that's the sort of thing that's good for Magic in general, even if it's not the best thing for tournament players.
It's definitely swingy, but that's not always a bad thing. The goal of Magic is not to have the best player win every single game.
I think it's cool. The thing I don't like about it is that the best Miracle cards, like Entreat and Bonfire, just don't scale correctly. For their casting cost versus what you have to pay for their Miracle cost, the disparity is just so huge. With Entreat, if you've ever played with that card in draft, no matter what the board state is, it's completely winnable if you could just top deck Entreat. And like, even a bad Entreat, like on turn 4, you're getting 2 4/4s for 4 mana. Like, a Broodmage Dragon costs 6.
I'm not a huge fan of the Miracle mechanic. Whenever you make the game about dexterity, I don't know, it just feels rotten to me.
I think the mechanic's fun. Like, I don't know if the excitement it causes is outweighed by the physical change. That part really bugs me.
I talked to Dave Humphries about this at the tournament. I'm like, when I was watching Hayne win his Pro Tour, the matchups were so exciting to watch. So from a viewer's perspective, I think it's a good thing because it makes it a lot more exciting to watch. But from a player's perspective, it's very difficult to test what kind of impact Miracle's going to have on your match. Like I went 7-2-1 at the Pro Tour, and I went 1-3 here with the exact same deck. And it was pretty much similar matchups, except, they would draw the Miracle at the right time, whereas I was getting the Miracles at the Pro Tour. So it's a lot of variance.
Aggressive decks reward experiential knowledge, maybe a little more than control decks do. Just experience, you know? If you're playing like a control deck or a combo deck, you need to play test. You need to know the situations that you're facing. I didn't play any games before Pro Tour Barcelona, not a single playtest game. So I was looking at situations where you know, my opponent ships it on turn 4 with 4 mana open of 3 different colors. I've never faced a situation before in my life. If I was playing a control deck, that is a recipe for failure. But as an aggressive deck, I know the cards that are in the format, so I can kind of develop a game plan based upon, you know, like I said, pattern recognition, knowing what they could possibly have, trying to maximize damage while maintaining a board presence and applying pressure and denying them resources, all of these like concepts that I've just known for 12 years. I set myself up for success by not trying to play a deck that I'm not going to be able to perform with. For tournaments where I don't have a lot of time, I know that I can play, at least there's a floor to how bad I can play an aggro deck, and I think that floor for me is actually, you know, pretty high.
But Paul's definitely right. There are a lot of advantages to playing an aggressive deck. You know, even if you run across a bad matchup, you can still just get a really good draw. You don't have to know what every single opponent's up to. Even from a playtesting perspective, you can get in 100 games with Boros in the same time it takes you to get in 20 games with the control deck.
I like the draft format. I think that black's like a little bit too bad and green's like a little bit too good. I mean, it's a fun format, but it's like basically impossible to play black, I think.
I'm not a huge fan of Adversary Restored Draft. I think that the power level difference between the best cards and the worst cards, even among the commons, is so huge that you end up with games where, you know, they're pretty lopsided. You know, when you draw the top half of your deck, it's awesome. When you draw the bottom half of your deck, it's terrible.
And I feel like the disparity between those two avenues is like, here's the bad cards, here's the good cards, and there's nothing in the middle, makes it a pretty high variance draft format as far as draft formats are concerned. But as far as, you know, gameplay, I would say it's my least favorite draft format in the last 5 years, pretty easily.
I like Adversary Restored Draft also. It's really aggressive, also swingy, which I hear a lot of people complain about. It's definitely different from other limited formats. I know there are plenty of players who like to play the really slow, like grind out divination decks, and I may be one of those players, but this is just something different, and once you adapt to it, it's really fun.
I like it so far. What I've heard, the rumors from people, is that it doesn't have the replayability of like the Innistrad and Dark Ascension, especially put together, where you can just draft over and over and discover new things, different archetypes, ways to put different cards together you hadn't thought of. You know, I heard someone say that there wasn't a single card in the entire block they hadn't at least sideboarded in once in, you know, playing the format. There was, you know, even Graveyard Shovel they found a use for at some point. And what I've heard is that this is not quite like that. There's a small learning curve, then a kind of period of 15, 20, maybe 30 drafts where you like it, and then a steep drop off where it just seems like you're doing the same thing over and over again. I'm sure the grizzled veterans who played a million drafts are going to smash me when I go back to playing Magic Online, but I haven't gotten to the point where it's stale for me yet.
Snapcaster, it's not even close. I mean, not remotely close. Like, Snapcaster is like the best creature ever printed, and it's just doing, I think it's just incredibly too powerful. It does a lot of things that you don't want to do. Like, it leads to recursive game states, it rewards you for playing a bunch of instants and sorceries that are very cheap, it like punishes big creatures with like Vapor Snag and Mana Leak. It just does a lot that you really just don't want to promote.
I think Delver is a more egregious, just power level card. They banned Wild Nacatl from Modern and then printed a 3/2 flyer for 1. So I don't get it. This 3/3 for 1 that you have to build your deck around is too good. This 3/2 flyer for 1 is totally fine. What?
It's so good and kind of so easy to build around based upon the fact you just want to play blue spells in the deck, which are just good anyway.
Delver. I think Snapcaster is good, but Delver is just like Blood Braid Elf level of annoyance.
Man, for standard, it's Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage it reminds me of Blood Braid Elf in Jund, where
Blood Braid Elf was good for Magic because it allowed bad players a chance to win against good players. Delver does the same thing, except good players are always going to win.
You can beat Jund if they don't draw Blood Braid Elf. Sometimes if you have a really good draw, you can beat them if they have 1 Blood Braid Elf. But beyond that, you're in trouble. And the same thing seems to be true of Snapcaster Mage. It's just like, you get card advantage at the same time as tempo advantage, at the same time as like brutal flexibility. Snapcaster Mage, I think, is what really makes the Delver deck great in standard. If I had to choose one, which is a bigger mistake in general, probably Delver. Just 1 mana for 3/2 flyings is too good.
It's just as annoying as Blood Braid Elf, but it's a little bit better because good players can build decks around Delver that are where his Cascade was sort of just like, all right, just put Blood Red Elf deck in it, and I hope it hits the right card. I hope it hits that Maelstrom Post when I need it, as opposed to Sprouting Threnex or something.
Again, it's the same thing as with Block Constructed. People just like to complain about everything, and if you're winning, it's the best standard format ever. You know, you never find a format where people don't complain. So it's like a 1-mana 1/1, and if you get lucky, you turn it into a 3/2 flyer. It's a really good card, but like so is Primeval Titan, so is Geralf's Messenger. You know, so is Gravecrawler. Like if you're not playing really good cards, you shouldn't be playing Constructed. You know what I mean? I don't know. People freak out about nothing.
Okay, it's GP Salt Lake City. It's a pretty big meal. There's like 18 of us. I showed up a little late, so I ordered just an appetizer. I didn't really get anything big. But then they're like, all right, we're gonna play credit card game. And Gabe Walls had just did really well in the World Series of Poker. So he came straight from Vegas, so he still had the 90 grand that he won in his pocket. Like he's walking around with like 90 grand in his cargo shorts. He's like, no, we're playing credit card game, all right? So there's like 18 of us. I'm like, all I did was order an appetizer. So I'm like, all right, you know what? Give me a dessert too. I'll try to, you know, leverage a little bit. And they're like, oh, you're ordering a dessert now that you find out we're playing credit card game? I'm like, relax, not a big deal. Him and PDR, who was also at the dinner, they're like, you know what? Since we're kind of big time, we'll put in 3 credit cards each, and you guys just have to put in 1. So between the two of them, they have 6 credit cards, all right? Clearly, they're out like in the 8th round. They're both out. And it comes down to me and Jerry Thompson, the final 2. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, God, I cannot believe. I ordered maybe $12, and I'm going to be jammed for like $800 now. And I'm just like, Jerry, do you want to just like split it? You know, we'll just chop it. He's like, nah, I'm all in. Let's go. Clearly, they pull my card, and I have to pay. Literally, I was on tilt the whole weekend, and this was on Friday too. And I just tilted the whole weekend. I'm playing for top 8, and in the last round, it's Kamigawa block, and I have a Moloku in play, and I tap 5 mana, and I'm going to put the Azami in play, but I have another Moloku in my hand, and I put a Moloku into play instead, and I'm like, all right, they both die, and I'm convinced it was the credit card game that put me on tilt that caused me to do that, make that misplay.
Why does every great credit card game story begin and end with Gabe Walls?
Yeah, Gabe Walls, just the most absurd human being on earth.
Always like the fatties.
In Barcelona, a bunch of us are out at dinner, and it's like me, Nassif, Reitzel, Owen, everybody else. We all sit at a big tapas table, you know, it's one of those tapas restaurants, so we're sitting around the table, we're all telling stories, we haven't seen each other in a while, and we're all talking and stuff, and then Nassif is just like sitting there thinking. You can see he's just thinking. He's like, and I'm like, Nassif, what are you thinking about? He's like, and this is on Sunday, so this is Sunday night, Finkel made top 8, and he's like, you know, Finkel's not that good. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, I mean, he's good, but it's like, I don't see why people always think that he's like the best. You know, he's good, but like, I see him make plays, they're like, I would make the same play. And I'm like, Nassif, are you happy enough that you're the 3rd best player of all time? Like, do you have that kind of envy that you need to be? He's like, no, I'm not, it's not that, it's just like, he's not that good, you know? And it's like, the idea that the 3rd best player of all time would still be that jealous of the 1st best player of all time, I mean, I don't know, we were just ragging on him the whole time, and thankfully he lost a credit card game, so he had to pay for the meal too. Yeah, I don't know, it was a good time. I haven't seen those guys in a while.